Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam and welcome back to the AFI Project. Today we're going to be taking a look at Mike Nichols' comedy from 1967, The Graduate. It tells the story of Benjamin, played by Dustin Hoffman, a young man who has just graduated from college and has absolutely no idea what he wants to do with his life. So he does what I'm sure a lot of young men must do when they're not sure about their lives: sleep with his neighbor's middle-aged wife, Mrs. Robinson. And during this sordid affair, he falls in love with Mrs. Robinson's daughter, Elaine. Every time I have brought up the movie The Graduate to, especially around my relatives, they have absolutely loved it. And this is one of those movies where I respectfully have to say, I don't get it. Now, just to give some context, this is not a Gone with the Wind type of situation, where my problems with the story aside, I get why this movie became the big cultural phenomenon that it became. But with The Graduate, this is a head-scratcher. I'll talk about my problems with it in a little bit, but for right now I want to talk about the stuff I liked, starting with the cinematography. Again, I feel like I bring up the cinematography a lot in this review segment, but I gotta call a spade, and this movie especially looks absolutely brilliant. The cinematographer for this movie was Robert Surtees, the man who made the cinematography for a little movie called Ben-Hur. You may have heard of it. In my research, I found that Surtees had said in an interview that this is one of the hardest movies that he had ever worked on. It took every ounce of creativity in his 30-year career to try and make this movie look good. Keep in mind that this is the guy who shot The Chariot Race. Which chariot race, I hear you ask? The Chariot Race. So for him to say that this is one of the hardest things he's ever had to do, that just speaks to the gravity of how beautiful this movie looks. And speaking of beautiful things, let's talk about the score by Simon and Garfunkel. I grew up listening to Simon and Garfunkel. I am a huge fan of classic rock, and Simon and Garfunkel are just wonderful. And hearing their songs in context with The Graduate, I mean, they just ring even truer to me now. But let's just say, for many reasons, the song Mrs. Robinson is gonna ring a little different to me now. And while I found the acting and the actors to be really good, I personally found the stories behind the casting to be more fascinating than the movie itself. That goes double for the four main characters: Benjamin, Elaine, Mrs. Robinson, and Mr. Robinson, and Benjamin's father. Make that 5. The shortlist for Benjamin included Robert Redford and Warren Beatty, who would have been in the movie if he had not been committed to a little movie called Bonnie and Clyde. Spoiler alert, that will be another installment in the AFI Project. The shortlist for Elaine reads like a who's who, and it includes Faye Dunaway, aka Bonnie in Bonnie and Clyde, as well as Sally Field, who would go on to have a lengthy career in movies like Steel Magnolias and Lincoln, and Steel Magnolias castmate of hers, Shirley MacLaine. The list for Mrs. Robinson was said to contain names like Judy Garland, Rita Hayworth, Eva Marie Saint, and Natalie Wood. Yes, West Side Story Natalie Wood, and Rebel Without a Cause Natalie Wood. Mr. Robinson was played in The Final Product by Murray Hamilton, who would become the mayor in Jaws. However, the names that Mr. Robinson was offered to is just a who's who. The list includes, but is not limited to, Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando, Frank Sinatra, Walter Matthau, and Gregory Peck. Like, that's a completely different movie with any of those names. As far as Benjamin's father goes, we could have had an Odd Couple reunion, because Jack Lemmon was originally supposed to play Benjamin's father. But the role was also offered to, and let me read these off, Yul Brynner, Kirk Douglas, Christopher Plummer, and I cannot make this up, Ronald Reagan. Yes, the future President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. By the way, when this movie came out, he was already governor of California for well over a year. Like, that was a mistake, guys. Like, license to print political ads. Come on, people. The point I'm trying to get at is this. Among other things, it was a very lucky break that Dustin Hoffman was cast as Benjamin Bratton, because if he hadn't been, he probably wouldn't have had a career that lasts to this day. And this is the part of the review where I have to go into what I didn't like about this movie, which is the story. Because, let's just say, there are certain aspects about the story that I feel have not aged all that well. Now, I'm not trying to be, this movie's problematic. No, I'm not trying to be that person. My thinking is that this movie was very much a product of the times. It was the late 60s. It was different back then. But that still doesn't make some aspects of this movie rather, tricky. The entire plot of the movie is basically Benjamin sleeping with Mrs. Robinson, who's like 20 years his junior. And the damnedest thing about it is that the movie plays it off like, oh, boys will be boys. I'm not trying to say that boys will be boys is a bad phrase. I believe in that phrase. But there's a big difference between getting a barbed wire tattoo and sleeping with another man's wife. Apparently, I'm not the only person that picked up on this. When reading reviews for this movie, I found that Roger Ebert had initially ranked this movie 4 stars out of 4 when it was initially released. But then, when he saw it again in the late 90s, he knocked it down a star. It went from 4 stars to 3 stars, and called Benjamin, among other things, an insufferable creep. I think that's a bit strong a wording, but I do see where he's coming from. And at the end, when you're supposed to feel sympathetic for Benjamin, you kind of don't. Like, without giving too much away, the ending is just bizarre. The point I'm trying to get at is this. I don't think that The Graduate is necessarily for me. Like Lex Luthor said in Superman 1978, someone could read War and Peace and think it's a simple adventure story, and yet someone could read the ingredients off a chewing gum wrapper and unlock the secrets of the universe. All movies are subjective, but I think The Graduate is just overrated and has not aged all that well. But maybe that's just me. If you've seen The Graduate, please leave your thoughts on the movie in the comments down below. I would love to read your thoughts on this. Good, bad, somewhere in between. I'd love to hear what you all have to say. But that is all for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Next time on the AFI Project, we're going to be taking a look at a far more classic movie in 1927's The General. But if you liked this video, please be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way, when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.